Hello and welcome to the February edition of the WinUI Community Call. My name is Gabby and I'll be your host for today. Welcome back. A little bit about the Community Call. It takes place on the third Wednesday of every month or so. I know we're joining you again from November at 1600 UTC, but specifically 9 a.m. Pacific time. Our next call is slated for March 15th. If you're new, you can reach out to us on GitHub at Microsoft UI XAML for WinUI 2 and WinUI 3, or at Microsoft Windows App SDK for Windows App SDK. You can also follow us on Twitter at WinUI. This call is recorded. So we have the slide here for those new to the call to give a little bit of an overview of WinUI 2 and WinUI 3. So if you're new, please take a look at the recording. Sweet. So for today, we have a couple of new features that we've introduced in WinApp SDK 1.3 experimental and slated for WinApp SDK 1.3 in general, as well as general news around WinApp SDK and WinUI. And then as always, we have time for live Q&A. We've gotten tons of questions from you on our GitHub discussion this month, and we'll also be capturing your questions that you're asking live in the YouTube chat. So with that, first up, we will have Dimitri come on and chat a little bit about window.system backdrop. So Dimitri, I'm about to add you to the stream. Awesome. Hi, Dimitri. How are you doing?
Hello. Hi, doing good. Thank you, Gabby.
It's good to have you.
Yeah, so thank you. All right, so
I know you're still working on getting ready in the background, so no worries. Go ahead.
Okay, and can you guys hear me well?
Yeah, all is well.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about a new feature in WinUI WinApp SDK 1.3 Preview 1, which is we internally call it Easy Materials, Easy Mica, and Easy Desktop Acrylic, and basically, what we shipped previously was a form of these backdrop materials that was not particularly easy to use. So we did make in WinApp SDK 1.1, it is possible to use the composition Mica controller and desktop acrylic controller, which basically wrap those effect brushes, the familiar acrylic brush, the one that samples from behind the app, as well as the Mica is a more efficient kind of brush that samples from the wallpaper and the theme color, and both of them provide kind of like a nice looking effect, particularly for a background of your application, is where we intend them to be used. So in 1.1, the way to use this was essentially to directly consume the composition API types. So Mica controller, desktop acrylic controller, and it really was not very simple to do though. So you had to implement the policy aspect completely yourself in the app code, and that would include things like reacting to theme changes. So for dark theme versus light theme, we'd want to parameterize these differently so that they look kind of more natural in those environments. A window activation state would also inform like whether or not we actually show the effect. So only an active window should show the effects. So all of this had to be tracked, and there were it actually ended up being over 100 lines of code. That's the sample that we have up publicly. So like the work here was to really make that a lot easier. And to make it more like a XAML feature, where this what we had was basically not very XAML-y, and in particular, it didn't have any markup exposure, so you couldn't simply specify in your markup, I want to use Mica here in this window. I want to use desktop acrylic in this window. Right. So So in this release, Easy Materials are here to help. So there's a link there to the GitHub spec for this, and for linking. Next slide, please. Right, and now we'll dive into them a little bit. So the central to the API that we're adding is this new type called system backdrop. This basically is a wrapper for the composition IXP controller and related bits. Like maybe a little bit hard to see, but it consists mostly of connected and and I should mention this is a base type. So the model here is that for a material that is being added, we derive from the base type, so in the derived type we then use we then instantiate and use and essentially connect a concrete composition controller, IXP controller. So there's connected. So we override target connected, target disconnected from the system backdrop type in, say, in our concrete type, such as, for example, Mica. So this, and then there's a couple of methods here also in system backdrop around the what we call default system backdrop configuration. So it's kind of like the policy aspect. We tried to make this extensible so that it's easy to write essentially other backdrop material implementations. So both the policy bit and the actual backing controller are customizable by the deriving type. So this also is meant to kind of follow the acrylic brush and the XAML composition brush base, which is the base type for that in XAML that we've had for a while. Those are brushes, and the idea here is that these are backdrop materials, so they're only usable as essentially the background of a window. They're a little bit different in the context in which they can be used, but they appear. We try to make them kind of parallel each other, so they're kind of, it's a familiar experience to actually use these backdrop materials. And then for the materials themselves, so we're shipping two materials again, Mica and desktop acrylic. So desktop acrylic is essentially the host backdrop acrylic effect of acrylic brush. In WinApp SDK, we weren't able to support that in the acrylic brush itself. So at the element level of an application for technical reasons, but we are able to support it at the window background level. So it is now possible to have that punch sort of like sample behind the app and mix it in with some other effects. Overall effect that was quite popular. So there's that. Now there's not a lot being exposed here on our Mica and on our desktop acrylic types at this time. They do have parameters. The underlying IXP controllers do have parameters such as tint opacity, basically the various tweaks on those things. We're not exposing that yet. That we hope to expose that in the future to make these a little bit more usable, but not so much more usable, but a little bit more flexible. currently these materials are using the defaults specified by the IXP controllers. So basically you get the default light theme and the default dark theme experiences of mica and desktop acrylic. Now it is also possible to just just derive yourself from system backdrop and build your own sort of mica or desktop acrylic that does expose those things for instance. So yeah, that's next slide, please. And the context in which these can be used today is the window object. So the XAML window now has a system backdrop property, and what happens here is we create a system backdrop based backdrop material and set this property to that. Now with that, it is now possible to kind of use more traditional XAML usage model. So here we have, even though this is actually still a little bit wordy, but here we're setting the window property in system backdrop property in markup to a new mica backdrop. All mica backdrops are currently the same because there is actually one parameter on that one kind, but they're mostly the same. So this kind of makes sense here, but that's all that's needed to actually use it. So that's kind of like a quick overview and of what this is. It basically is wrapping up the functionality and kind of like the plumbing that did exist to connect IXP controllers into the host window for XAML apps, and but again, making it like a XAML type, and that can be used much like an acrylic brush. That should be familiar. A little bit more about the policy. So that bit, that bit is kind of interesting. We have like a default policy that essentially is again similar to like acrylic brush, and we've built that into system backdrop, and it reacts to theme changes in its context where it's being used. High contrast, so to that window basically, high contrast status change that's actually for the system, and to Windows activation changed, and then it updates the corresponding IXP system configuration object, which manages the policy on that side, and the derived class connects those up. So what we do is we grab this default configuration, which gets hooked up to the XAML visual tree and is watching for these events. And when these change, once hooked up to the composition configuration, it then maps them. So the effect of that is when theme changes, the IXP controllers switch to the other theme settings, and so the look of the material should accordingly change to match that theme, the default presentation of the material in that theme. High contrast, we turn it off and go to fallback color, and activation is also turn it off, so only the active window has the actual effect, the actual effect brush being applied underneath. Right. So with this this model, it is possible to take this default policy and kind of potentially create your own, and then that sort of filters, sort of augments the default policy or filters it in some way. And basically, we also have an event when the policy changes. So we kind of wanted to create these extensibility points such that people can just create their materials, that could be slightly different from ours, but that could be an important difference to them. And so it it's reasonably extensible, and again, kind of familiar to those that have played with acrylic brush, and especially the underlying XAML composition brush base that's based on.
Cool. So with that, I know. Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, sorry. Yes. I was going to actually. Sorry, I was going to chat. I was going to mention a couple other minor points, but yeah. So again, there's some things are, we hope are coming, such as really the exposure of, like, for the concrete types, the exposure of the properties of those materials. So basically, the tint opacity and luminosity opacity and those things. And one thing that's worth noting is similar to acrylic brush, these materials can be shared in multiple sites. So you can actually create a system backdrop, create, say, a Mica instance, and use it in, if you had two windows, you could do that. This is kind of, this is an important piece because it enables the ability to then use define materials as theme resources that are typically shared. So when there's more customization available, or on custom materials that people build, they can the sharing of an instance of material does work, and so that it should be possible to actually use now defined materials as theme resources, and kind of giving that, again, back to like what acrylic brush capability that it gave you. So that's probably it's kind of I think that was one point I wanted to mention. But we're basically we tried to make this easier to use because again, it was there, but it was quite complex. And so hopefully now, by just throwing essentially that markup in, we can get the default functionality going, and then the process of extending the system backdrop and using your own should be relatively straightforward. The code for like desktop acrylic itself or Mica is very short. It's it's maybe, I don't know, 20 lines or something like that. So quite straightforward for something simple like that. So hopefully this helps folks get some more effects into their apps.
Great, Dimitri, I will. I know you got to need some time to get your demo set up, so I'm going to. No problem. So I'm going to move to Pratik for window.app window, and then we can come back for your demo.
Yeah.
Sweet. But thanks. Yeah, thanks for the overview. Awesome. So with that, I will introduce Pratik. Hi, Pratik.
Hi, everyone. Hey, I'm good. So, hey, everyone. My name is Pratik Anand. I'm a developer who works on WinUI 3. That's my dog, by the way. I include him on the slides. Yeah. So today I'm going to talk about the new feature which I worked on, and it's now being presented to you, the window.app window. So just a clarification, when we say window, is actually window in terms of WinUI, which is microsoft.ui.xaml.window. And I've added a new property called app window in there, which allows you to access app window pretty easily within WinUI. For those who are not familiar with app window, it's kind of it's a new set of APIs which actually makes it's kind of wrapper around your HWind Win32 operation. So if you say want to move your window or resize it, set its icon, so instead of fiddling with the Win32 API calls, you can just use the app window APIs to just quickly get them done. And it uses the same coding paradigms as the rest of WinApp SDK. So it makes it quite easy. So until now, the app window APIs were there, but you needed to write a lot of code to actually get them to work in the context of WinUI. So what we decided is that in order for you to write less code and achieve more, we should get a new property like the window.appWindow, so that you have access to the app window object anywhere in your code, a stateless app window object. And we also have a spec available. So I would encourage you to go and read the specs if you want in the URL provided. And I can kind of explain a bit of what our app window is achieving with the example I have. Yeah, thank you, Gary. So if you've seen that example, I've included two snippets, one old, one new. So the old one, what it's doing, that's the current, you can say, that's the current way of accessing app window in WinUI code, that you need to just call Win32 interop, get your HWin window ID, from window ID, get the app window. So you get an app window object. Now you'll be able to call the function, and you have to maintain all this and that in C#, in C++, even more. So what now we did is, as long as you have access to reference to your window object, you can just call my window, which is my window, XAML window dot app window dot foo. That's it. So that's all you need to actually access all the functions in app window. And you do not have to maintain app window as a separate object in your code, because we maintain just a single copy of it throughout your entire window. And it's attached, and we handle all the memory allocation and every handling. So it's kind of like stateless, for you just pick and use it and achieve more with it. Yeah, now quickly switching to another topic which we have is now the inclusion of window.app window was kind of a first step in our larger goal, is to actually integrate more app window into WinUI 3. And the most important aspect there is the title bar merge. I know a lot of you have do use the custom title bar which we provide, and I know it's a bit difficult to get working right, because honestly, title bars are kind of hard. They're hard to cover all the cases, and we recognize that it's hard. So that's why we have been working together to make it actually simplified. So first came the WinUI 3 custom title bar, and the lessons we learned from there, they went to apply to make the app windows title bar. So we now have two implementations of custom title bar, which are similar in a way, but also kind of different in a way. And which creates kind of confusion for the users, because, okay, they have to figure out which one to use. And this one works in a certain way, that one didn't work in certain ways. App window title bar until very recently was only working in Windows 11, but now it supports Windows 10 too. So basically the coverage, we are expanding on it. So we decided that it would be the best for our customers if they have a one simple path of using title bar. What we decided is to actually merge their implementation. So what happens is you have, this is more about providing freedom to the customer. So if, say, you as a customer just require to call an API and the title bar works and you don't tweak anything else, you'll get to call the WinUI 3 custom title bar, which are more high level. However, if you're the customer who wants to actually tweak the title bar a bit more, make it, customize it to your liking, so you still will have the option of calling the app window title bar, which is lower level APIs. So the idea here is that WinUI 3 custom title bar will, under the hood, use the implementation of app window title bar, and will provide both the options, same APIs, and they'll work well with each other, because ultimately at the end of the day, both will be calling the same code. And this plan is still in like early process, but one of the few goals I have in these plans is to maintain backward compatibility. So any code you have written till now with WinUI 3 custom title bar should continue to compile in once we do this change. And Meanwhile, improving experiences like theming. I know themings right now, it's kind of confusing. You set title bar to transparent, set resources here. So improve theming. And another much requested feature is interactive controls. We'll be bringing that to you because App Window title bar supports that. And with WinUI 3 custom title bar, we'll make it easier to use even more. And overall, just good default. So yeah, that's the whole plan with going forward. We thought we'll let the community know about it. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Pratik. And yeah, so right now we have window.appwindow for 1.3, and then the app window WinUI 3 merging is coming a bit later, but we're doing a lot of the work. I know a lot of the windowing team is doing a lot of work right now to get ready for that in a later release, right? Awesome. Great, thanks, Pratik.
Thank you.
Before we go to news in WinUI and WinApp SDK, I'm going to bring Dimitri back on to do a quick demo of window.system backdrop. So hi, Dimitri again, and I'm going to start sharing your screen.
Great.
Sweet.
Thank you, Gabby. Yeah, so it's a very simple demo here. Basically, the materials themselves, the two that we're shipping. So here I have just an app with no material applied, so just white. And then here is desktop acrylic. So now we can see the Supra back there a little bit. And then here we have mica. No Supra, but we still see an effect that is, yeah, this is the efficient kind of thing. And this is a variation of mica that is also included. So, yep. And the real interesting thing here is how simple this is to do. Is basically going back to the slide where, just throw this into the XAML as a property on window. So that would be the simplest thing. Here we have a little bit of toggling, but it's very straightforward stuff. So that's really all it is.
Great. Yeah. And I know the Zoom, I can't quite see the words either. I know somebody just commented that, but that's okay because the focus is on the materials and the backdrop themselves. So and just the ease of use there. So
right. Yeah. Yep. Cool.
Thanks, Dimitri.
Thank you.
Great. And with that, some news in WinUI and WinApp SDK. So starting off, there are a few updates across the platform. One I'll just highlight here in this slide is that we've recently published an update to Template Studio 5.3, and that's just bringing it up to date with .NET 7 1.2 as well as WinUI EX 2.1. So check that out if you are interested in updating. We're also going to chat a little bit about updates to the WinUI gallery and give a bit of news around File Explorer and WinApp SDK. I'll also share what's new and upcoming in WinApp SDK 1.3 and the general release schedule for the year. So with that, I'll pull on Greg to chat a little bit about the gallery updates. Hi, Greg.
Thank you, Gabby. Hey everyone. So just wanted to give you all a quick update regarding the WinUI 3 gallery. So we just released a new update to the Microsoft Store yesterday. And so I had to spend a couple minutes to kind of walk you through some of the new changes that we made to the gallery. So the big thing here is that we actually added 4 new sample pages to the gallery. So you can see here on screen, we have a new page for the clipboard, a new one for the file picker, and then we also have 2 new sample pages, one for shapes and another one for lines. So I'll spend a couple minutes just kind of walk you through what those samples are all about and what they look like in the gallery. So first of all, the clipboard and the file picker sample pages. So here you can see in-app screenshots. So it's a bit smallized, but you can check it out in the gallery by just following the link that's at the bottom of the screen. But basically, on those 2 pages, you can see how to use the clipboard API and also the file picker API. So those APIs are pretty commonly used throughout Windows apps, and they're actually pretty used as well in the WinUI 3 gallery. So we figured, we might as well just include sample pages in the gallery to make it easier to see how you can use those APIs. So you don't have to go through the WinUI 3 gallery source code to figure it out. So it also pretty complements the documentation that we have online. But here you can kind of see it in a more interactive way. So on the clipboard page, you can see how to copy text to the clipboard and also paste text from it. And then on the file picker page, we have several different examples. So like how to pick a file, how to pick a folder, how to pick a specific file type, or like how to pick multiple files. So we try to provide a list of various examples, and yeah, feel free to check those out in the gallery now. Last but not least, we also have the new shape sample page and also a new page for lines. So on those two pages, you'll be able to see how to create commonly used shapes. So for instance, how to create a circle, how to create a rectangle, how to create a polygon. And we also have several sliders here to see how you can use the various properties associated with those shapes. And then on the right side, you see a screenshot of the line sample page. So here it's how to create lines, how to use the various properties. So increase the stroke thickness, stuff like that. And we also included a couple of more complex examples. So like how to create a series of connected lines, stuff like that. So yeah, we're really excited about those new samples being added to the gallery. So feel free to check it out. You can follow the link that's at the bottom here. So it's aka.ms/WinUI3/gallery. And so this will redirect you directly to the Microsoft Store. Or you can also check us out on GitHub. The name of the repo is WinUI Gallery. So with that in mind, back to you, Gabby.
Thanks, Greg. Awesome. So with the WinUI Gallery updates, we also want to share some news with File Explorer. So we've been working really closely with the File Explorer team over the last year plus to migrate the app to WinApp SDK in WinUI 3. So File Explorer is on WinApp SDK is going to be available soon in the Windows Insider Program update channels. So right now, as you can see, it looks similar to the Windows 11 Windows 11 File Explorer that you use today, but you'll notice with this small circle that File Explorer is using that have a pizza icon are running on WinApp SDK. So if you would like to use it, check it out. Please send feedback on Feedback Hub for any issues that you run into. But we're really excited to be able to share this publicly and have folks test it out. And big thanks to the File Explorer team as well for working closely with us on this. So some more info. So we've been working on migrating File Explorer to WinApp SDK and also preparing a 1.3 release. So this release is centered around improving dev efficiency with WinApp SDK. So we've been fixing many performance, security, accessibility, reliability fixes. Some of these are included in 1.3 Experimental 1. But as before, earlier today, we've mentioned the new APIs, window.app window, window.system backdrop, that make it easier to use existing features in WinApp SDK. We're also making it easier to debug your app through improved error handling, catching unhandled exceptions. We know that was a really popular GitHub issue, and raising a new event for failed SAML resource lookups. So that's static resources, theme resources, that kind of thing, to make it a bit easier to find where the resource names aren't resolving. And additionally, we've also, as Greg mentioned, making updates to the gallery, Template Studio, as well as improving the default Visual Studio WinUI templates. So right now, I've been tracking a few of the public-facing issues and features with the 1.3 milestones on the WinApp SDK and WinUI GitHub pages. So here's a list of some community filed issues fixed in recent releases. As we haven't had a community call in a bit, we also released some servicing updates for 1.2, 1.22, and 1.23. as well as I mentioned, 1.3 experimental 1. So thanks for filing those issues, and we're looking forward to improving the quality of the platform. And then we've also got questions about the release timelines. So as mentioned, we recently released on February 6th a 1.3 experimental that includes both APIs that we're planning on shipping in 1.3, as well as those that we plan on remaining experimental until 1.4 or beyond. We're also planning on shipping at least one more 1.3 preview to stabilize some of those APIs, publish a bit more docs for some of the new features that we are publishing. And then we're targeting the beginning of Q2 of the year for the stable 1.3 release. And then about 6 months after that, as we've started getting into a cadence before, about 6 months after that, releasing a 1.4. And we'll have more info to share about what we're thinking about for 1.4 in later community calls. And with that, it is now time for Q&A. So we got a good, let's see, about 25 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides and start to get some folks on. Great. Adding some folks on audio as well. Hi, Pratik, Dimitri. Sweet. Hello. And as I think normally Savoy is our question MC, but he wasn't able to join us today, so I will also be question MC, and folks will also take questions as they see them behind the scenes. So I'm looking at the top of my list, and just to start popcorning us off, I think Ryan and Mike have a kind of big overview question that maybe you want to tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, feel free to join me on this one too.
Get started.
Yeah, so Amik Halov asked, well, really a whole bunch of questions. How is the team structured? What does the dev process look like? How do you make decisions? How are people chosen for the team? Do you discuss ideas together, or does one person come up with everything? And who invented WinUI? All in one big sort of post. So I can try and tackle some of that. While actually Mike and I are going into this one, just to let you know, I was a little bit late to the call today, and so I haven't had a chance to read all of the questions in the YouTube chat. So if you want to repost any questions that you feel haven't yet been answered, I'll try and get to those as best as I can. It's just too much chatter for me to go and read it all in short order and also try and answer questions. Maybe I'll work backwards on this one, Mike. So who invented WinUI? Well, it's hard to answer.
I have some comments on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, it's kind of funny. One time, the origins of WinUI are in WPF. One time years ago, I went and looked at Wikipedia to see what it said about WPF. It had some good content, that great. And I was curious, like, who had been filling it out. And I went and looked at the history of it. And I found this one post, this update that someone had made that said WPF was invented by somebody whose name I had never heard of, who Bill Gates said was the smartest person he'd ever met in his life. It was, of course, a completely bogus update. And Wikipedia must have some good bots, because 45 seconds later, it was removed. But the origins are in the WPF, and the origins there are kind of interesting. It brought together a lot of people from, at the time, Internet Explorer, WinForms, User32, GDI32, and was trying to bring together a lot of ideas from all the existing art. The phrase at the time was "best of the web" and "best of Win32." And so you can still see some history like that. Like a lot of XAML events have a handled property in the event args. Like you can mark a pointer event handled. That is, what is it called in HTML? That came from the idea of, I think it's called suppress default in the HTML DOM. The dependency properties in XAML come very much from how attributes work in the DOM. So there's lots of inspiration from those things, and then since then it's evolved into Silverlight and XAML and WinUI.
Yeah, and I kind of think of like WinUI as like if there was going to be a distinction point between WinUI and like all the XAML lineage that it is built upon, because there's a lot of lineage, as Mike was pointing out. I think probably the moment it sort of began was when we first had the idea. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago now, to decouple from the Windows OS and sort of ship separately instead of shipping in box like UWP XAML does. That to me was sort of like the birth of WinUI. Some people may take issue with that or think it sort of started at a different time, but I think that that concept was a really important concept because we realized we couldn't deliver features into in-market versions of the Windows operating system. And so that to me was sort of, anyway, that's a very light history, but there's a whole lot that went into that, including how we even came up with the name WinUI. It was heavily debated, and there's all kinds of stories I could tell, but I'll just bore everyone on the call. There was more in that question, though. So just to touch on some other things, does one person come up with every idea? No, that's not how it works. I come up with many ideas, and I'm frequently told they're bad. But no, we're a team, and the way that we operate is we operate probably like what most teams at any software engineering or software vendor companies work. They have sort of a backlog of things. They have a set of competing priorities. We have things that our customers are telling us to do. We have things that our management are telling us to do. There are projects that we work on internally. You've heard a little bit about File Explorer. That wasn't sort of a top-down thing, but we have that partner. That partner is going to give us about 1 billion launches a month. And so we wanted to jump on that opportunity and harden our code base to that kind of level of activity. And so we prioritize the things that File Explorer needs in order to go and achieve that. So there's no real sort of like method other than just get a backlog built, and then try and then take the sum of the resources that we have and try and figure out where should we put those resources. And I think that most smart groups, most software engineering works like that. Okay, maybe I'll stop there because we want to be able to get to some other questions too. Yeah, I guess we need to sort of jump in, don't we? Anyone else want to jump in, or I can try and jump into another one? Okay, I'll jump right in now. So Raphael was asking, is Product Board still being used? The answer is no. We haven't been using Product Board for a while, and we have archived the information on Product Board and fed it into our backlog, but we're really trying to be sort of the way that we manage our backlog is actually in two places. We have the GitHub repository, and I know Bob Pulliam's team has also been spending a lot more time there over the last few months trying to clean that up and get that into a better state. We also have an internal ADO repository that we mirror quite a lot of the things from GitHub into. And the main reason we do that is actually just internal processes. Our org is largely an ADO-driven org, like the Windows group. And so we have to do reviews with management and things like that in ADO. That's just the expectation as to how we do those things. And so we do maintain sort of those two places. Product Board was sort of a third. It wasn't providing a lot of value, so we don't use it anymore.
Yeah, and building off of that, I think the comment was, hey, it's still in the README. Why? And so I've just opened a PR to make that super clear. No, we're not using Product Board either for the roadmap capabilities or the feedback capabilities. So thanks for calling that out.
There's a couple of questions that came up for you, Dimitri. Some discussion about whether or not you can set the backdrop in markup, or if you have to use code behind.
Yeah, I was gonna actually address that. So it was a bug that prevented us from doing that, and it is fixed, and it did make it in, so we can update our release notes, which were written back when the bug was not fixed yet. So good news there. It should work.
We got it fixed in time for the experimental 1 release?
Yes.
Okay,
we
sweet.
did. Yeah.
Awesome. And the other one was the behavior of acrylic brush on Windows 10.
Yeah. So the one about like over a white background, something.
Yeah, like I was thinking this would be a question about desktop acrylic. Desktop acrylic works on Windows 10, but it's Mica that does not. And I think the new backdrop has handling for that.
Sorry, yeah, yeah. I'm not like I wasn't sure that was a question about the acrylic brush
Okay.
actually.
Okay.
But once I find that question again.
Sorry, maybe I misunderstood the question. I guess the main thing I wanted to comment on was that using the Mica, the new Mica backdrop. Mica is supported on Windows 11, but not on Windows 10. But using the new Mica backdrop, you don't have to worry about that. It takes care of creating fallback behavior on Windows 10.
And Dimitri, I just saw another question related for you in chat, and I just wanted to bring it up at first from Morton with regards to setting backdrop in XAML, only hard code, right? No binding or setting from a resource. So can you bind or set that from a resource?
Good question. I'm actually not sure because like window is like a little bit different. So I'm not aware that it doesn't work, but
I'm not
Mike,
yeah.
you know?
Windows not a framework element. I don't know about a resource. I think binding should work, an Xbind should work, and they are shareable, right?
Yes.
So
yes, they are.
So you could have one bound to multiple windows, for example. But it's just a property, and Xbind just has properties, so I think the Xbind should work.
Right, and yeah, it would probably be a bug then if it didn't. So we will check that out. But yeah, like in general, it should work. Like the goal was to make it kind of like acrylic brush because people like that, seem to like that API.
Yeah, I'll jump in here and answer maybe 4 or 5 questions together. So there's a whole bunch of questions around, is X feature coming? And the ones that I see here that have been posted in various places, either in comments or on GitHub, they include XAML Designer, Maps Control, Game Bar support, Xbox Holo support, Islands. I'll try and answer those 5 at least. And we're trying to follow up too on the Win2D one because I know that there was some effort to try and get that closer, but I don't want to misspeak on the call. But let's see. Okay, so for the maps control, the answer is we have engaged with the team that produces our native maps control, and we sort of agreed to revisit it this year. So we approached them last fall and said, hey, we're super busy with File Explorer. You guys are super busy with other things that they're working on. Could we sort of revisit this in 2023? They said yes. We would still be interested in potentially bringing it over. So we don't have any firm plans there, but there are open lines of communication that are happening on that front, and we'll have to go and see what the right timing is of that. So nothing concrete, but it's not really a no. In sort of the no category, we've got Xbox and HoloLens. So WinApp SDK a while ago mentioned that we're not planning to go to Xbox and HoloLens. That hasn't changed. We're not planning on doing any specific work for game bar support right now as well. So just stating that up clear so that you can build your own plans. The Islands question is an interesting one. So our partnership with File Explorer has been using Islands. We are using basically sort of like a private, not public implementation of that. Some of that leaks out into some of the experimental stuff that we've been doing. Islands is an exceptionally complicated feature. It's one of the most complicated features that we've ever built. And we're certainly making progress on the Islands front because of that partnership with File Explorer. When we're able to actually take that and make that public, we're still trying to determine. There is the moment we ship that feature, people are going to be using it almost immediately in ways we never anticipated. And so it is a difficult one to really go and make robust and get right. But I'll just say that we're continuing to make progress and have made quite a bit of progress with the File Explorer partnership.
Yeah, I'll just add on really quickly, Ryan, to the islands part. Just saying that a lot of the islands work is also available in experimental.
Yes.
So you'll see changes on that front. If you want to test it out real early, provide early feedback for your use case, you can. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No. Thanks for jumping in and mentioning that. That's really great to call. It's been experimental for quite a while, and so it is good for people to go and try that out and use it. But we don't want to make that public until we're pretty confident, since we have to support it, forever until WinUI 4, at least. So that's why we're being pretty cautious about that one. And finally, a lot of questions about a designer. And David and everyone else in the YouTube chat that were asking about that question. Basically, a XAML designer. So the XAML designer remains on our backlog. It's not something we've been focused on, and there's kind of two reasons for it. Well, maybe one reason for it. The main reason is it's really super costly to build. That's not to say we shouldn't build one or we'll never build one. I don't think we've really reached that determination yet. But when something is really large and costly to build, if we don't think we have the resources to do it, we just don't debate it. There's not really a lot of sense in even like getting deep into should we or shouldn't we, or when should we, or whether, like it's going to have enough of a cost that we felt like, well, we're not going to be able to deliver on some of the other partnerships that we're doing, some of the other work that we're trying to do that is higher priority. When we get to the point where we think that we have line of sight with enough resources and enough person power to be able to go and do something like that, that's when we'll have to make that adjudication and to say, are we going to do it or are we not going to do it? But we're not at that point right now. So just, for full transparency, sharing that's not really high on our radar. It sits in our backlog along with a lot of other really good ideas that are in our backlog because we haven't been able to get to them. Okay, I think I covered all the is feature X coming, but if there's one missing, please hit that in the I already see things coming in, so maybe I'll have to revisit this in a minute, but I'll make space for somebody else who wants to answer something.
Thanks, Ryan.
We need a hand raising mechanism.
Yeah.
Oh, just jump in.
So somebody earlier on, David Pruitt asked earlier on about a XAML previewer. I was just going to comment that Visual Studio is the XAML previewer that I use mostly. Oh no, actually, I forgot what I was talking about here. There's actually a app in the store, XAML Studio app in the store that gives a side-by-side markup and preview of what the markup's doing. I think it's actually using a control from the community toolkit. So anyway, XAML Studio.
I wanted to field a couple of questions as well as Ryan did. And just like Ryan, I don't want to speak out of turn and misrepresent Win2D, but the last I talked with the team lead, I think there was an acknowledgement that maintaining Win2D as a standalone package that sits on top of WinApp SDK affords better agility, better responsiveness naturally than bundling it into the WinApp SDK and being attached to that ship cycle would do. That said, if there's concerns, I'm not sure I fully understand what the concerns are there. There was some mention, Sunil, about dwrite core support. Ongoing updates to WinApp SDK remain compatible with the version of Win2D on NuGet.org. There's no reason that you shouldn't be able to continue to use that combination, much like the Windows Community Toolkit. So I think for the foreseeable future that Win2D will remain as a standalone component that depends on WinApp SDK. If there's any clarification, dwrite core support. Thanks, Sunil. Okay, yeah. So I will forward that on to the team lead, Chris, and then he can respond. Maybe next community call we can bring back a more intelligent answer on that. C++ WinRT, there were a few questions that came up. Modules support is very interesting, of course, to replace the precompiled headers and enable faster builds and enable execution on lightweight build agents without running out of disk space or memory would be wonderful. The C++ WinRT effort is a community effort. It's open sourced. Kenny Kerr, who contributed quite a bit, and I did, and others are spreading our efforts among other projects such as WinApp SDK, Rust. And so if there's an interest in something like modules, I would highly recommend a community effort if anybody has the cycles and the interest to jump in on that. As far as the tooling experience, that obviously is not something that we can as easily open source. All I can say is that we are aware of that. We know that that's a bit rough, and we'd like to be able to improve it. It is in the backlog. I'm not sure when we'll be able to get to it. Just trying to give an honest answer there. There's a question that Bogdan asked about performance improvements. We did a lot of fundamental performance tuning in the C# WinRT layer in particular. So if we're talking about performance of .NET WinApp SDK apps, we've already done quite a bit of fundamental perf tuning there, and that brought us to within a few percentage of what we were seeing with UWP. Unfortunately, it'll probably never be better, frankly, than UWP perf, and the reason for that is with .NET specifically. And the reason for that is that the compiler, the C# compiler, had first class knowledge of WinRT, the legacy, the .NET native compilation toolchain. And so did the runtime. And the result of that is that you had those working very, very closely with WinRT, and they were able to really optimize that. As I said, we've gotten very close to that with the current version of C# WinRT. That said, Bogdan and others, if you've got performance issues, we're looking at kind of doing spot treatments now. So we can certainly preload and cache and pre-JIT and do all these kinds of things to try to accelerate hot paths when you find them. So open issues on that if you see it. There's a question on PowerShell, and then I'll hand back if somebody else has any other questions. There's a question on PowerShell, and I'm assuming that the question is specific to WinApp SDK, WinUI controls or something like that. Otherwise, I'm not sure why it'd be asked here. PowerShell, I think it was version 6. I might be hazy on the version numbers, but it was version 6, I think, that moved to .NET Core 5. And at that point, again, as I just mentioned about the perf with UWP, the C# compiler no longer had direct support for WinRT. So you can't actually load a metadata-based type in PowerShell 6 or later. You have to go through a projection assembly. You have to create something like a C# WinRT projection assembly and load that instead. So if that's the question that's being asked, then that's the answer. And that means that you have to create that projection assembly for yourself, whereas you would have had built-in support for any system type in WinMD. The option, of course, to that is to run on an older version of PowerShell. But that is the trade-off with the PowerShell that's hosted on .NET 5 and later, is that you don't have that built-in Windows runtime support. Let's see. I think I will hand back Gabby and see if I can collect up a few more while someone else takes a run.
Sounds good. I also see a question about that I can answer a little bit about the .NET 7 new native compiler. That is something that we're working on, work in progress for C# WinRT. This is something I'd like to look for like a 1.3 servicing or close to that. So thanks for the question. Definitely on our radar, active, in progress.
I was just talking to the developer that's working on that. And yes, it is. It is the support for that is in the C# WinRT projection, native AOT support. It's also in the runtime, and the last few versions of .NET. And I think my information is a little bit stale here, but .NET 6 and 7 both continued to add native AOT support, but now the blocker, the bottleneck is C# WinRT. So we need to add support to that. Specifically, the function pointer use that we're making use of is not AOT friendly. So we have to find an alternative. You can hunt down the details. There's actually an open issue on the C# WinRT GitHub issues tab that describes this and pros and cons of solutions. But it's understood, the problem's understood, and it's being worked on.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. And I just looked at the time, didn't realize we went over. I will hold on to, I'll hold on to questions for next time. We'll take note of those. And I know there's one for Pratik. We'll answer that offline. But we really appreciate all of your questions, of your feedback so far. We hope you were able to gain a good bit of insight for our upcoming plans, what we've been working on, what's coming next in WinUp SDK and WinUI. And we look forward to seeing you next month. So thanks, question answers, and thanks, community, for joining us. We'll see you soon. Bye.